Hey Hawk, thanks for coming on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's really good to be here.
It's good to have you. Like we were just talking, it was nice to be able to connect and do this when we were on our live with TikTok, and it was just such a great interview. But I knew that it would be more impactful if we were able to kind of just sit down and talk about some things and for everyone to be able to watch it. It was awesome having everybody be able to watch live, but to kind of go back and listen and hear some of like what you've been doing and a little bit of your story. It was good that you were able to get up here to Fort Worth. I know that you came a long way from Monahans.
Well, I'll never miss an opportunity to get to town and eat some food and have some live music and a weekend off. So it's worth the trip.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that was kind of how I saw it too. Like when I had moved the show to Fort Worth, I was a little leery about it because a lot of the people I interview are in Midland, but it actually gave some of them an opportunity to come to Fort Worth,
Yeah,
and
it's a good excuse to escape.
it really is. Yeah, and I mean it's pretty fun and low key, but so it's good to see you. It's good to have you in studio.
Glad to be here again, and I love your work, and I've been following you for a good long while, and I love what you're doing, and it's informative. That I've learned a lot from a good many of your podcasts, and it's good to see some old friends that have been on there
Yeah.
and see them doing well. So I really appreciate what you're doing.
I appreciate that too, the encouragement, because, even when I started the show, I knew I wanted it to be educational and valuable in some way. But then, when you get into something, it changes or it takes its own form, but it's been really great to kind of see the different patterns in the industry and like you said, the education and different parts of the industry, and people can get so many different takeaways from each episode, whether it's someone that's in the trades and they're navigating a career or someone that doesn't know much about the industry. It kind of shines a light on how things work, but also in a little bit of your neck of the woods, like somewhat of a disruptor, but also being able to shine a light on where we need to improve and where we've kind of been falling behind, in the industry, but mostly in West Texas.
Right. It's I kind of cut across the grain in a lot of ways from a lot of what you do. I've been fortunate enough with social media. I've been getting the word out about what we were doing. I think it was in the beginning. Um, a lot of people didn't quite understand exactly what we were up to. Um, and as we progressed and things, we really started getting into things. We really started getting a lot of people on board, and we started calling a good bit of attention to the issues that are facing not only in West Texas, but in East Texas and South Texas, and all over the United States in general. We get calls from Pennsylvania and West Virginia. They're having some of the same problems. Louisiana and Oklahoma. So it's not just a West Texas problem. It's not just a Texas problem. There's quite a bit of things happening all over the United States, and I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. We're just now scratching the surface.
And do you think that from, kind of shining a light and getting the word out, is it, seeing that like the infrastructure's outdated and maybe things hadn't been done properly in the past, or it's time for an overhaul with maintenance and that's been neglected?
There's a multitude of things in talking specifically about plug and abandoned wells that have come unplugged or started flowing again. There's a multitude of things that have caused these things to happen. One of them for sure is poor plugging practices. The fence posts and the cross ties that are shoved in the wells, and then wells are covered up. Um, there is back in the day when a lot of these wells that we've been working on were plugged. They were done by uh, more or less people that would go out and they would get the salvage from the well, they would get the pump jacks, they would get the sucker rods, the tubing, and whatever production casing they could get, and that's where they made their money, reselling that equipment. Plugging was just a secondary obligation for them, but they were actually in it for the salvage. And it's quite clear that they didn't have any oversight, and they just kind of went out and did what they wanted to do, and hence we have starting to see the problems of of their mistakes 50 years ago. We also have a considerable amount of produced water injection going on, which is a contributing factor. The well construction, these wells were drilled in the 50s. They weren't constructed as best as they could be, and then you've got the fact you've got deteriorating steel and casings in the ground that are starting to fail and starting to allow flow pass into these poorly plugged wells. And so you've got a multitude, or as a cliche, a perfect storm of events that are happening, and not each well is different. I mean, there's not just one diagnosis for each well. One well may be failing at one point, one particular area. One may have two issues. One may have three or four different issues. But nonetheless, the bottom line is these wells are failing. The plugs are failing, and they have to be re-entered. And once they're re-entered, you can't really just go back. There's not a cookie cutter solution to going and replugging these wells. And I used an analogy the other day. It's we say these wells are 70 years old. If a 70-year-old man goes to the hospital and he can't really explain to the medical team what's wrong with him, then there's a battery of tests that they do, and you just don't go treat an old man for a heart attack when he's not having a heart issue until you determine that's. And I kind of look at these wells as geriatric patients, and you have to examine them. You have to run a battery of tests. You have to clean out the well bore from the previous plug. You have to do well bore analysis. You have to see where the casing has failed. You have to run bond logs. You have to see the extent of where the cement is. You've got a lot of things that you have to do to replug these wells, and to make sure that they stay plugged this time. And a lot of people think that plugging a well is just going and pumping cement into it and cutting the wellhead off and driving off, and that's proven not to be the case.
And it's understandable that after so many decades, especially like you said, like the infrastructure that was put in the first place, like that, it wasn't as sophisticated as it would be today, and it probably like poor practices like you've mentioned. And I mean, I know because I come from the pipeline side that I've heard similar stories of things that happened 30, 40 years ago that wouldn't happen now. And so you have these series of events that create the problems that we have now, where it's so overwhelming to even think about addressing the problem, and it's really easy to ignore it before it becomes an actual problem that you can't ignore, like because it's out of sight, out of mind for a lot. And with some, maybe they're not thinking it's much of a priority, or they don't want it to be a priority, and I can see where that creates that friction as far as like what needs to be done, and then the powers that be, like what they're willing to address. But with the process of plug and abandonment, like how you say, like people think that you just put cement in and drive off. What is the proper way to do that, and what is the purpose of it? So give a little bit of education on that.
At the end, let's say a well's life cycle is between 30 and 40 years, and it no longer becomes productive. It costs more to operate than it makes.
Okay.
For instance, I mean, there's wells out there people are still pumping, and those stripper wells that make 2, 3, 4 barrels a day. It's not enough to pay the electricity bill to run the pump jack. But they keep operating them, and as long as they're operating, they don't have to go and plug them. And that's at the end of the life. It's the funeral for a well, and nobody likes to pay for a funeral. So at the end of the life cycle of a well, these wells have to be plugged. And the Railroad Commission has rules. You have to file for an application for a permit to plug the well, and there are certain things that you have to do, which are the bare minimum. The thing about plugging wells nowadays is, more especially in these legacy and older wells, the bare minimum is not going to be enough to hold up for 50 years. More especially with all the injection that we have going on out in West Texas. So these things have to be addressed specifically. Uh, Looking into the well bore, seeing if there's holes in the casing, addressing those. Uh, Gosh, there's been some wells that left fish in the hole, left pipe in the hole from a previous workover that was never covered up. The main issue is cleaning out the well bore, getting the bottom, and doing a well bore integrity surveys. Wireline, some of the wells that we've been working on have open hole sections, so we want to run caliper logs to see how big the caverns is. That way, you can figure out the correct amount of volume of cement to be pumped. And that hasn't been done. Cement bond logs to verify. Back in the day, they would do a temperature survey to see where the top of the cement was with a temperature tool, but now we have the tools that can pinpoint exactly where the top of the cement is in the well, so that you can formulate a cement program. And as I've said, every well is different, and you can't just go through and set a cast iron bridge plug above the perforation, spot some cement on top of that, come up a hole, set a couple of balance plugs, and cut the well off, get the wellhead off, and say that it's plugged. And typically, that's essentially that's what's happening. Nobody's really wanting to spend the money, and I mean, and who can blame them? You do not want to spend money on a well that you're never going to recuperate any kind of
Right.
it's dead cost.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you're never going to get anything else out of it. And then you had the bigger operators back in the day, and they sell assets or transfer assets to a smaller operator, and then they go to a smaller operator, and they're just kind of passing the buck, and until they get to these real small companies who end up going bankrupt. And then these wells become orphaned, and they become a ward of the state, and then tax money ends up having to come pay, pay to plug them. So, there's a lot of things, as you said, in the pipeline industry is improved, and in oil and gas industry we've really improved, but I haven't really seen a huge improvement of how we retire these wells and put them to bed for good. I still think we're doing things the same way that we've been doing them for years and years. There's so many different additives. There's so many different plugging media. The resins and different kind of things that aren't getting approved, that have been tested in other places around the world, but are just not being looked at over here. There's people are contacting me all the time with new processes and new tools and things, and I really think that we've got to revamp how we look at our retirement obligations on these wells, and we're going to keep drilling, and we're going to keep having to plug wells. I mean, this is just how the industry goes, and but we're really going to have to get on top of this, and we're going to have to change the way we look at things.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And, as I've learned a little bit more about this part of the industry, a little bit more about plug and abandonment and just maintenance and in the integrity of work, I know that I've spoken to a couple different people in West Texas that are doing maintenance for, I think probably more, I wouldn't necessarily just mid-level, maybe tier one operators as well, but there are some operators that are getting on board with going out and doing maintenance, preventative maintenance, and making sure that as we move forward, things are being done differently. Of course, that's not adopted across the industry, but there are operators that are practicing that. The problem, though, is all of these orphaned wells, as you say, that nobody wants to mess with because there's no profit. They're basically going to have to go in knowing how much it's going to cost them to repair all of this damage that's happening, and a lot of it has been probably swept under the rug because if it's way out in West Texas, it's like so far out of mind that people aren't seeing the problem. If it's not blowing up, if it's just seeping out of the ground, it's like if nobody's calling attention to it, you can get away with it to an extent. If nobody's out
Right.
there seeing it, if it's not on someone's ranch, or if it's on someone's ranch and they don't want to speak up or they don't see the problem, like there are some instances where it could just be completely off the radar. And now, kind of shining a light on it, you're getting friction from different areas because nobody ever wants to address that kind of problem. And they, like you said, if there's no profit in it, it's really hard for them to justify that sense of urgency because when their bottom line is their profit margins, and they're not feeling like it's really impacting the safety of people, as far as there's not a potential explosion. Not a lot of people live there. It's desolate areas, a lot of them, that it's not a top priority. But it is, because you're talking about the water aquifers. It's across the state, it's across the country, it's affecting livestock, and it's not just West Texas. And it's also, to say that it's not as paramount as other areas, because West Texas is so far off the grid. It's not populated the way Austin, Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth is. There's neglect.
Right.
There's definitely some neglect there, as far as making that a top priority.
And another factor that I try to convey to people is if the if a well becomes orphan and becomes a ward of the state has the onus to come back and plug them, and they're using money from the industry, but they're also using, I think they asked for $100 million again last year from the legislature to try to get on top of this problem. But they're taking money from the state, and $100 million could go a long way to buying school supplies, to paying our teachers.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't get my head around why are we spending money, from the rainy day fund or wherever it comes from, down in Austin. Why is the state having to pay to plug wells for the industry? And I've had several ideas floating around about this, where everyone who's ever had an interest in the well has to pony up a certain percentage of what they produced. Just anything to get this off the taxpayer. I mean, we've got teachers that are underpaid, we've got state employees that are underpaid, and yet we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars every year plugging orphan wells, and it doesn't seem to be an end in sight. If we end up having another downturn, what is the orphan well number going to come up to? Then?
Right.
So you've got a lot of small operators that are keeping their head above water. But once that price dips and we go through another bust, uh, we're going to have one.
Yeah, of course.
I'm fourth generation in this business. I've been through several myself. The whole family has. But one will come, and when that comes, what's that going to affect the number of orphan wells? These small operators can't afford to plug them. They can't afford to be in business anymore. They can't cover their own costs, so they'll bail out and file bankruptcy and become insolvent. And
Right.
so what's going to happen with these wells? Well, they're going to belong to the Railroad Commission again. And here we go. The taxpayers are starting to fund a plugging program. And so there's that really needs to be addressed and looked at. The industry can take care of themselves, and whether or not they want to believe it, that retirement obligations on these wells should be the onus of the industry, and not so much the state and the taxpayer. And sooner or later, somebody's going to have to address the elephant in the room and sit down and say, "This is a problem. What are we going to do to fix it?" We're going to need to come up with some different schemes on how we're going to look into these things, and everybody's going to have a little bit of hurt. The current operators, the viable operators, they're going to have to hurt a little bit, and Billy Bob's Oil and Gas, he's going to have to hurt a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and unfortunately, that's just how it's going to have to wash out.
Right. Well, and it just kind of seems like there's a pattern with that. Like you said, the boom and the bust. A lot of things fall through the cracks every time we have a bust. And then when there's a boom, it's everybody starting over, and it's everything that happened before is out of sight, out of mind, and we all want to forget. And it's like we look at that, something that's affecting, water supply and the integrity of the land. But you see business owners doing things like that all the time. They file bankruptcy, they don't pay their vendors, they go down the road, they go start a new company, and the vendors aren't paid, and their employees are, just put out on the street. And so there's a lot of irresponsibility that happens in the industry due to negligence and just the cyclical cycle of things, where you can kind of get in and out at certain times and maybe go unnoticed. But with decades of this work happening, here in the Permian, and then across the country, it's you're starting to see where that's not working anymore. And I don't know if this is similar, if it would be a comparison, but I know, a few years back that doing anomaly digs on the pipeline was a very, very like I think there was someone that I had on my show that spoke about it, that with his pipeline company, he did anomaly digs for a while, that he could not put enough guys to work doing all of the maintenance, all the dig ups. And I've been on anomaly digs before, and I know how tedious that can be, and it's very expensive because not only are you having to block off that part of the line, and I mean, you're clearly losing profit whenever you have to shut down a line, but then you're digging it up, you're cutting the weld out, you're doing whatever the repairs, and you're having to go through that whole process. What he explained it to me was that he was all over the country, mostly the Northeast, and I don't remember exactly what the reason for it was, but typically when things start blowing up, or there's loss of life, or there's bad press, or things are getting brought to the surface, you have no choice but to address it. And so that's kind of reminding me of this, like what you're talking about and what you guys are going through and what you're trying to get the support in, and have action steps, because even though it might not necessarily be the people that are in the position today that have caused the problem. It is a responsibility, and it's accountability, being in the industry, and being responsible, and knowing that the profit margins in the industry are so vast that they should be able to absorb some of those costs to bring everything into healthy functioning, or at least like you said, it's like not just pouring the cement and saying and calling it a day. It's like really taking an honest look, and making sure that these problems aren't going to continue in the future.
Yeah, correct. And early in the mid '90s, we plugged some wells on land in Holland, and in the Netherlands, and offshore in the North Sea. Um, and I was recently asked, if I'd want to go back and look at them, and I go, yeah, I really do. I mean, you look back 30 years, and I realized that we did a lot more. There were a lot more steps to plugging a well. We were using a hydraulic workover unit, uh, and offshore, and we plugged 6 wells on the Rhine River that had been drilled in the 50s, and I would love to go back and have a look and see what we did then, how it looks today, um, just for my knowledge, and I've never really thought about that, and I wasn't planning the job. I was just a hand, but it would really be interesting to go back and look at a couple of those, and see how they're doing today, 30 years on, and remembering the steps that we spent 2 to 3 weeks sometimes on a well plugging them, and numerous bubble testing, pressure testing, uh, cement, running extra cement retainers, and having come from working in the East Texas field, and then going to the Netherlands to see the extra steps and the effort that they put forth, in plugging those wells over there, and it really didn't resonate with me until we started doing what we were doing, out here, and I said, oh, this is far, this is above and beyond the bare minimum, and this is what top shelf looked like at the time.
Okay, and that was kind of what I was thinking also, because you've worked all over the world, and you've spoken about, like you said, Holland, Bali. You've been able to be a part of it being done properly, and uh, going the extra mile. Not just, I mean, it's the thing about especially West Texas. You get service companies that want to do a great job, that go above and beyond, but then you also have service companies that don't, that will do the bare minimum or what's required. Or
I would disagree with you on putting it on the service companies. And I think in my experience, since I've been back in Texas for the last 3 years, service companies want to do things the right way, and they will do as they're told. They might not always agree with what they're told, but they're being paid to perform a service. Uh, the onus is on the operator to make sure that they take the extra steps, that they go above and beyond the bare minimum. Uh, and there's some operators that do, and there's some operators that are willing to. But then again, there's operators that said, well, the Railroad Commission doesn't make us do that, and it's the Railroad Commission is the bare minimum of what needs to be done, and just because the agency doesn't make them do it, doesn't mean that you can't hit your coveralls up and go a little bit further and do a little bit better to make sure that in 20, 30 years my kid's not coming up digging up your well.
Mm-hmm. No, and I do agree with that. I do, and just again, back to my experience in the industry, I've worked for service companies that do want to do that, and I've worked for the ones that don't, or that will get out of having to go the extra mile, and that creates problems too. I mean, I've been on a project where, I mean, thank goodness the line didn't blow because it was a high pressure line, but I mean, if they would have just marked out that ditch line, we wouldn't have even had an incident.
Right.
So, I mean, there is responsibility in all parties, but I can see where, you get a service company, they want to do a jam up job, they're great, they're experienced. Operators, they want to do the same thing, but then, oh, we're just looking at regulations, and and so it's like everybody has to be on the same page and the same team, and so it seems like that's a lot of what you're doing. And although it may be a, tumultuous process to try and have all these different conversations to actually get things rolling and really get the right people making it happen, I mean, it's just really where we're at in, like, in the industry right now, because like you said, it's, I mean, 30, 40, 50 years, I mean, we need to look at maintenance. Like, there's going to be some maintenance issues across the board.
Right, and there's well integrity companies that provide maintenance services and look after and help extend the life cycle of the well, that do a good job. And a lot of companies have well integrity programs. We've written some for some operators in the past, and they continue to maintain that system, and auditing wellheads every couple of years, and monitoring the pressures on annuluses and things like that, and recording them and keeping a record and being able to track it. And those are just a few of the things. And there's a good many operators out there that do that. But there's a good many operators out there that are trying to starve a profit out of a cow. And you can't do that. You've got to feed cattle if you're going to make any money on them. And it's the same thing with anything, oil and gas industry included. You've got to spend a little money on your wells to keep them making money. And a lot of people will just suck the guts out of them and then try to pass them on to someone else.
Right.
That's quite a popular thing to do in some circles. So I'm not saying there needs to be more regulation of our industry, but I think things need to be enforced a lot better, and we need to run a tighter ship on how we conduct our business. And like we spoke earlier on TikTok, there's a lot of great things happening in the industry. I've learned 2 or 3 things over the last couple of months that special tools and things that I had never seen before, and it's great. And I'm like a little kid in a candy store. I want to take them out of their pickup and take it and put it in my shop and hold on to it. But then again, we're as we grow forward and we're getting better in one sense, we're not moving, or we're getting worse in another sense.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's like having 2 mules pull a wagon. You can't have one going left and one going right. They both got to go in the same direction. And I think throughout the whole life cycle of a well, from start to finish, we all need to be pulling the wagon in the same direction.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, very common sense practice. It's reasonable, and it's pretty black and white. And that's kind of like, I mean, same, because since I've been doing my show, I talk to so many people that are doing amazing things, innovation, implementing technology, and keeping workers safer, more opportunity for people, and just really raising the standards in a lot of ways. But there's also the industry can be a little slow to change, or not willing to necessarily take responsibility, or nobody wants to jump up and say, hey, we're going to pay for this, or we'll take this, we'll put a crew out here, and we'll dedicate our time and energy. But that, you have to take the good with the bad, and that's the thing about oil and gas, because there's so many great things about it, the products that are made, the way it fuels the world, but it can be mismanaged in different areas and it creates waste. And so some of the people that talk badly about oil and gas, they're not completely wrong. Just because there's so much to it and it's not completely organized, there's not some blanket procedure of how we do things, that we do have the mules going in different directions. But thankfully, I think that we have enough people that are going in the right direction, that are doing good things. And that was why I started my podcast, was to really give that voice. And when we have conversations about, the more difficult topics, or things that are going on where it's harder to really like dive in, because it's the things nobody wants to talk about, and we do it in a really constructive way, and just trying to lay it on the table so people know what's going on, and how we can do it differently. The problem with something like this, though, is it does fall back to the operators of the Railroad Commission, because then your hands are tied. There's only so much that you can do. These are not cheap fixes, and you can't just devote yourself to the manpower to make it happen. So it has to be an industry change. It has to be, like you said, not necessarily more regulation, but more action. Less discussion about it, and less saying that we're doing something, and more action steps, and saying, this is our procedure, this is what we're doing, this is how, at least get the ball rolling, and show that we're moving in the right direction, because it's not a one and done. Even the ones that are currently orphaned, that are leaking, that are problematic, there can be more in the future. So this needs to be a system that's in place as we move forward, and just continuing to make the environment better in the industry.
Right. And case in point is we have a neighbor in Pecos County that's had an orphan well that's been flowing on her place for over a month now. The Railroad Commission came out and dug a pit and lined it, and hasn't really been back. And this is not the first one that's happened. See, I had one last year that catastrophically failed, and I think one before that. And this is in an area where every few months there's a well an orphan well that catastrophically fails, and these wells have never had a viable operator. Some were drilled on trespass, so they were drilled without a lease. I mean, it's a whole big mess. A lot of them are legacy that were drilled in the 40s and 50s that have been passed along, and these wells fail at a remarkably quick rate at surface, and flow to surface some fairly good volumes, and it's like the commission waits until they had a catastrophic loss of control before they move in. And the longer you wait to investigate and plug these wells, the more expensive it's going to get. Mm-hmm. We observed an orphan well a couple of years ago that the Railroad Commission plugged, and I think they spent over $900,000 on it, on one well. It's as time goes on, there's more deterioration, there's more corrosion, there's more damage being, it's like, you're going to have a heart attack, but you're going to have, arterial buildup, and you're going to have a high blood pressure, and you're going to have, things are going to compound until, you end up having an open heart surgery, and it ends up costing millions. And there's not a lot of difference between that and what's being, what's happening in Pecos County and other counties, around West Texas, and that where the wells have been orphaned, they're waiting on the state to get around and plug them, and the longer the wait, the more money it's going to cost the taxpayer to do it.
Mm-hmm. Now, is that why you decided to run for the Railroad Commission?
Not necessarily. I believed.
So I know you kind of fell into the whole ordeal. That wasn't the
I
plan.
was kind of offered up as an alternative to the Libertarian Party, and I thought about it, and I'm not a politician. I don't like politics. I don't like to talk politics. I don't follow politics. I don't like politicians. But I was given an opportunity, and I thought, well, okay, this will be a way for for me to help the Libertarian Party fill a gap, and maybe I can get some state recognition to what's happening. Uh, I made it abundantly clear that I wasn't going to raise any money, and that I was going to do everything on social media, uh, and and I did, and the uh, the response was amazing, and uh, I I've gotten a lot of good feedback from people. I had a guy tell me that a guy reached out. He said he hadn't voted in 20 years, and he said that he saw what I was doing, and he got up and he voted for one person, and that was me. And
That's
it's like,
awesome.
wow,
Yeah,
that's
that's huge.
that is very impactful, and I get a little touched up thinking about it, and
Hmm.
I save that message, and I I've gotten a lot of people are on board with me running again. I'm kicking the idea around. Um, I'm thinking about it. I haven't made a decision. I don't have to file till December. Um, but a lot of the public is really, hey, well, are you going to run again? Please run again. We've got a lot of issues in the state that need addressing. East Texas is having a solid waste problem. West Texas with our orphan wells and our plugging issues there, and South Texas, and there's a lot that's happening in the state, and I really would like to think that the people need one of their own
Exactly.
to
Hmm.
voice what they want to do, and so yes, the decision is 5 months away yet, um, and I'm considered. What really is a hard pill for me to swallow is having to raise money, and I really firmly believe, and I'm stubborn and hard headed. This is a civil service job, and you're working for the people, and you're working for the people who voted to put you in that office. Why do I need to raise $10 million to go to work for the state?
Mm.
And that is man, that's a burr under my saddle pad. It really rubs me the wrong way that if I decide to that I'm going to have to do this, that I may have to go through that process, and I just hate asking people for money to feed the political machine when we've got families that are struggling and kids that don't have food during the summer, and uh, you know uh, I love to see people eat, and
Right.
I think everybody should eat, and the raising $10 million to run a political campaign when our teachers are not being paid enough, and like I said, when people are struggling, it's just it makes
Yeah.
me grit my teeth.
Right.
I just
Yeah.
it really takes the passion out of it. If it was something where I could, the Fort Worth Star Telegram, where I could buy a full page ad with my resume on it, and say, there you go, this is this is me. Do you want me to regulate your oil and gas?
Right.
I'd be good with that, but that's not the way our political system is.
Well, exactly. And like, I mean, just as convoluted as that, seems to be, it's if that's the way it's done, that's part of the process. And I mean, you could see the response was overwhelming. I mean, your platforms just blew up during all of that, and people were really advocating for you. And like you said, getting a message from someone saying they hadn't voted in 20 years and they were backing you. And you're absolutely right. It should just be a civil service job. The people vote for you, and you're the best man for it. And because I firmly believe, especially because I come from the field, the experience that I've had, tons of experience I don't have, but from what I have done, it gives me an understanding of what people go through every day, of how everything is done, how everything functions. And so there's no substitute for field experience. And you have so much experience all over the world. And like you said, just being someone that, I mean, you live in Texas, you believe in the state, and you want it to be better. We can see this first run that you did very well. For you to just jump in there like that. And I think people listening to you and seeing you out in the field and your infamous red coveralls, yeah, it's like very recognizable, Hawk. Like, who that person is. But then just like listening to you talk about, and like not being afraid to speak the truth. And so I agree with you. I would have a hard time with that too, raising money for the campaign. However, if there is the opportunity for you to really be that change in the state, I would love to see you run again and be a voice of the people, because we need more of that. We don't need more politicians that do things just the way they've always been done because they want to be in the political game. And that's what a lot of it is.
I agree. I don't I don't play well with others, and I definitely don't play politics, and that's I think that's what Austin needs. I think that's what Texas needs.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I'm a firm believer in it. It's time the political dynamic changes a little bit, and
Hmm.
we start getting closer to the voters and the people that pay them, um, than the lobbyists and the big interest groups, and that's what's that's what I would want to go down and fight for. I mean, somebody said, yeah, somebody told me the other day, so, well, if you get elected, it'd be nice to see you in a tie. Well, I don't wear ties. I'll never wear a tie. I'll wear coveralls.
You look fine
Uh,
without a
well,
tie. You got
I'm
a
in
nice,
town. I'm in
yeah.
town.
You
You know,
got
if
your
I
blazer on. You
if
think you're looking very distinguished.
if I come to town, I like to dress.
Yeah,
But
but
most
you're out there doing the work.
right, and I'm more comfortable in coveralls. I do when I do dress. I do like to dress loud, but I'm more comfortable in coveralls, and wear them almost every day. And I think if you're gonna work for the people, I think that's how you ought to dress. Like you're actually going to work.
Well, you're being true to who you are.
Right.
It's like somebody that's never been in the field, like they couldn't put on those coveralls and feel authentic or be authentic. But especially with how quickly things are changing with technology, data centers being built, the population expanding, the concerns we've had about the grid. Like there are other things that are going to be happening, like problems that are coming in the future.
And water. You don't hear people talking enough about water.
Hmm.
And that was one of my platforms is that we've got to start doing something with our produced water, and we've got to start getting industry off our groundwater. That may sound a bit hippy dippy, but water is a huge concern. I have people in Northeast Texas that are fighting a reservoir. That could possibly be being built over an the northern end of an old legacy oil field that was drilled in the 40s. And if any of those wells were plugged like the wells that we're seeing out there, why would anybody want to take their drinking water out of a reservoir that
Right.
it's got crude oil and produced water flowing into it? So, water is I think a very underrated issue. More especially I think in the Metroplex and in the Austin areas. You when you when you when you're in West Texas and you're sitting on three water aquifers, but people are still having to go to Sam's on Sunday and buy 3 or 4 cases of bottled water to get through the week because they can't drink their water. Yet when you come into the city, they get their water from the city and it's available at the tap. And this our water resources are sacred. And if that makes me sound like a tree hugger, then that's what I am. I don't mind taking on that label, but when you get into a place, uh, you know, places I've been, North Africa, they have an aquifer that runs over the whole northern tip of North Africa and into West Africa, and there's been wars nearly fought over, that aquifer,
Oh,
and
wow.
that's how people in those countries take care of their water and how serious they take it. And I don't think we need to go to war over our water here, but I think we need to take a little bit stronger stance on our resources and who's using them and how much uh, and protecting our groundwater source
Yeah.
and making sure that it's available for generations.
Hmm. Well, it's kind of like, back to what I was saying about starting my show. Part of it was to educate people on what household products are made out of petroleum, because there's a lot of just the lack of education and understanding. You go buy your iPhone case or your clothing, and you just get it from the store or order it online, and there's not really that thought. There isn't that line of information to know the origin of where your products are coming from. And so I think that if people had a better understanding of the process, they would be more appreciative of like of what they own, but we live in such a detached consumerism society that you don't even think about it. So similar to water reservoirs, well, we just get bottled water. Well, we just, we have the Brita filter, we have a filtered shower head. All of those things are fine, but to actually have pure, clean water like coming out of the tap, and that you feel safe going into the lakes and the rivers, and not to mention that some of that bottled water is, I mean, it's plastic. And so even if it doesn't have BPA or whatever, I mean, it travels on trucks. It could be left out in the heat. There's all kinds of contaminants that can happen. There's been documentaries done on bottled water that it's basically tap water that's just bottled in pretty packaging. And so again, kind of, I think having someone like you advocating for it, and you've seen something like what you're saying in Africa where they are so passionate and protective of their water source that they would actually go to war over it, that's commendable. You're right. We don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. But there's not even anything worth fighting for right now, because you get so conditioned to say, well, we just don't drink the water. Well, the water's not that great. Well, if you have hard water, then use this product in your hair, or use this soap now for your skin. And that's just putting the Band-Aid on it, or just trying to say it's enough, because nobody wants to dig it out and start over. But we've reached a time where we have the technology, we have the communication, we have the know-how, but we need the people in the right positions to make it happen, and that seems to be like a little bit of that gap right now. And so it's putting you in that
Right.
juxtaposition.
We need there needs to be a mandate. There needs to be a process to start weaning industry off our water. And like I said about plugging wells, I mean, everybody has to share the hurt. Industry's going to have to share it. The state's going to have to share it. We got to make a lot of farmers mad, but we've got a lot of farmers that make a lot of money of selling their groundwater. That's going to have to back off. It's going to have to have a reduction, and they're going to have to back off as well. So everybody's going to have to share the hurt.
But would that improve things long term? It would just kind of would it be like a short term hurt, or it would be impactful for
It's
some?
like anything, nobody likes change, but nobody
Right.
likes things the way they are. Like anything, there's once you kind of, it's going to hurt really bad at first, and then once people start, the changes are made, and things start going a different way, and then all of a sudden you forget about the hurt. I'm gonna dish on the Dallas Cowboys. I was a Dallas Cowboy fan growing up, of course, Houston Oilers, and they fired Tom Landry, and when Jerry Jones fired Tom Landry, I mean, everybody I knew we were off the Dallas Cowboys, and that was it. It was over. It's done. And shortly after that, I went overseas, and I come back home, and friends and family are watching the Cowboys again on Sunday. I said, "Don't you remember what happened in 1989?" Oh, that was in 1989. And,
Right.
that's kind of the way things feel. Once we start making these changes, start weaning people off our groundwater. Yes, it's going to hurt. Everybody's going to be mad. It's going to be a change. It's going to be painful. But after a certain period of time, it's just going to become the new norm, and this is how it's going to end up being.
Yeah, and I understand that, and that it's such a complex um, system to try and make changes in, because there's so many different parties that are affected in different ways. And like you said, if it's affecting some in the short term, like they're not going to want to comply with these changes or support them. But then you have others that don't understand what's going on. They don't have the education. They don't have the connection. And I think that that's where, you have a really impactful, unique voice, because I think that you spoke so directly to people, and you're so closely connected to it, because you can sense the gap in politics and government in just the
Oh,
everyday
it's a
person.
huge gap, and as far as I'm concerned, the politicians, the people, is a huge gap.
There's so many broken links in the disconnects, and then the way things are done once you get into the political system, and people don't understand it. They can't see in. And so these decisions that are made, I mean, it can make people feel very hopeless and disconnected, to where their vote doesn't, they feel like their vote doesn't matter. They can't get anything happening. They don't see the change. It's kind of like you said, the Railroad Commission came out and they put a tarp out on the one leaking well, and they haven't been back. And so just to continuously try and fight these battles, like, I mean, you can get exhausted and burn out by it.
It's very overwhelming, and I mean, I reported a well up north of Pecos towards the end of last year. Did it by phone, and the Railroad Commission hung up on me. I told him who I was and told him what I was calling about, and I got hung up on. So it can get very overwhelming, and being day in and day out. And there's people out there, believe it or not, who have been fighting this battle longer than I have, and they consistently do it every day, and they never give up, and it's always one step forward, two steps back for them. But the step forward that they get is promising enough, and gives them just a little bit more to continue to go and to continue to fight. And the ranchers that are dealing with these problems, and landowners that are having these issues, they're the real heroes in the deal, because they've been dealing with it day in and day out for way more years than what I have. I've been back almost 4 years come November, and but they've been doing it for decades. So those are the unsung heroes. Those are the ones that drive to Austin for the Railroad Commission meetings, and send letters to congressmen, and make phone calls and do social media posts, and these are the real warriors in the deal. But as you said, the disconnect is, once that letter gets to that congressman, I've tweeted the Railroad Commission to come out and go on a tour, and I'd charter a plane and bring them out and pay them a day rate and just spend the day in the pickup with me, and I'd feed them and fly them back. And the same thing with congressmen. Come spend a day with me. It kind of, and nobody's showed up. So it kind of leads me to believe that either, number one, they don't want to know about it, and they don't want to know how big a problem is, or they really don't have an interest in trying to jump in the middle of the fight and start swinging with their own people. So
Yeah, that's true too.
It's kind of disappointing. If they realize it's a problem, then they don't have any option, but they have to jump in and start swinging with their constituents, which once again, it may hurt one of their donors' feelings, and next thing you know, they're not getting their check at re-election time.
Yeah,
So
and that,
hence we're backing up.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to take money to run for
Sure.
an office.
Yeah.
I don't want to be beholden to anybody except for the voters, and that is very idealistic of me, and it's what's the word I'm looking for? Naive. I get that. I understand. But I'm, that's still part of my belief system, is that if I want to go to work for the people of Texas, I shouldn't have to buy that job with $10 million.
I mean, that's not an unreasonable viewpoint, in my opinion, Hawk. I mean, I'd probably feel similar, because that's not what you're getting into it for. But it does seem that, and just across the board in the hierarchy of our government, that some of the political incentives are the donors and the relationships that you get, not with everyone, but with some
Sure,
some offices.
and that's part of it. I mean, basically, all I want is a state pickup truck and a state gas card.
And you would,
And,
yeah,
and
and
then
you'd wear
just
your
leave me alone.
coveralls
Just
and
tell me when to show up in a meeting.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, but then that's the way it should be.
Right.
That's absolutely
Right.
the way that it should be. You're a servant to the people. You're out. You're making things happen. You have the authority to make things happen, and that's what's important. But the political system does seem like it gets murky once you're actually in the process of things, and that just makes it difficult. Now, in the last 4 years that you've been here, and since you ran for the Railroad Commission, and even today, like, are you seeing progress, or do you feel like there's progress being made with the efforts you guys are putting in?
I think, I do believe, we had some legislation. Gosh, don't quote me on the bill, but they've required that idle wells after 15 years have to be plugged. Uh, that's a step in the right direction. I
Okay.
would have liked to have seen that uh, whittled down to about five. Um, and I do believe that I did some public commenting online where I wrote a letter and saying, I believe I said I would like to see it five, maybe 10. Uh,
And that's good. Continue to push. There's
we're
progress, but there
that
still needs
that
to be a
I'll
push.
take it as a win. I'll
Sure.
take it as a win.
Yeah.
What I need people there to understand is, once again, the life cycle of a well is 30 to 40 years. Um, if you 15 years is half of a life cycle of a well. So, if you produce this well for 30 years and then you idle it for 15 years, and now you've got to go back and you've got to plug a 45-year-old well.
Mm.
And you've got 15 years of contamination, 15 years of corrosion, and 15 additional years of, what all. So sure, I would have sang in the streets and did a jig for 5 years, but 15 years will take a win. So yeah, that's one positive note that came out that I can definitely get on board with, and we can build on top of that. Uh, I have visited with other people without naming names who work for other operators who've told me that they've gone back and looked at uh, some of the plug jobs that they've done that they just might not have been real happy with, and they've gone back and looked into those. So off the record, he told me, he said they just don't want you out there with a backhoe, and so they went back here to look. So, and
I can believe that.
so that's positive.
Yeah, sure. Because
But
it's also you're encouraging people to take responsibility because it would be I can picture that in my mind, you and the coveralls and the gray hard hat with the backhoe out there and exposing the well, or calling the attention. But that's a good sign if people are actually taking the initiative to correct the problems as they come. They're not waiting for you to come and do it yourself,
right, and
because you will.
and that was said. It's from an old dear friend, and it was said in jest. But
Of course, yeah.
he said, I don't want you out there on my location. So, so that's positive. So there are steps being made. I'm kind of a now guy,
Yeah.
and I want everything now, and I want everything right now. Uh, I have to learn to be patient to go through the process.
Well, and they say things in the political system are slow.
Right. I don't think if you carry the axe handle, I'm kind of a Teddy Roosevelt kind of politician, walk softly and
Carry
carry
a
a
big
big
stick.
stick.
That's
I
right.
prefer axe handles. I don't know if that get things done any quicker, but I would sure like to try. Until you hit a wall and you see how I think things can always move quicker,
Sure.
and I would like to see them be that way. But uh, who knows what the next step is going to be. I think things are moving. I think the public is starting to pay attention to what's going on, and hopefully we can start holding our politicians accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like I said, that, a couple conversations that I've had, there are operators that are, wanting to make sure that these changes are happening and the maintenance is, quality, staying ahead of it, and, going back and look, like you said, looking at some wells that maybe weren't um, plugged properly, and just kind of just taking the initiative on their own, and so it's not just waiting for the political wheel to turn. So that, I think that's also a great thing to see. So whether you run or not, I still think that using your voice and your platform. I know that you'd mentioned before that you were kind of not taking a break, but not necessarily posting as much as you were, because you do have some things happening right now, where just like really kind of like taking a look at what you have going on, and making sure that like how you're presenting the information isn't in conflict with
Right,
different things that you have going on in
right,
the background.
and a lot of people know what we've been working on for the last 3 years, and the social media tends to catch the other side's eye, and so number one, I've been lazy. It's not that we haven't been doing anything. I've just kind of been lazy. I want to make content, but then again, I don't want to put it out there and it become an issue as it has
Right.
in the past, and it gets thrown up in my face, and I get tired of having to, argue my First Amendment right and my truth, and it just keeps coming up, coming up. So, yes, I'm still there. No, I'm still recording things. I'm still, out there. I think I was on a live with three or four of the guys here. I don't know, maybe 3 weeks, a month ago, in the evening, and that was a lot of fun. And I still want to be involved, and I still continue to get messages. I only have one account. There seems to be some clones out there that are. I'm not going into the oil business. I do not want you to buy an oil well with me, and I do not want your money. And so there's only one account. But I think there's 9 or 10 clone accounts, or in fact, I got a message a couple of days ago that somebody was trying to make an oil deal that using an account with my name on it. Was trying to make
Wow.
oil deal. I said, look, I don't want to own an oil well.
Right.
Never have. So, yes, I'm still around. I do miss making good content. And I think what I miss most is connecting with the people online, and getting the instant messages and the comments and things like that. I used to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'd spend an hour answering everybody's comments, and because I wanted to make sure that everybody was heard and was answered,
Yeah.
you wake up and you get 163 comments, and before the first cup of coffee's even poured. So,
It's a lot.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be there. I'm going to be doing some more content. It just right now I just kind of took a pause, and we'll put something out there. And
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got other things that you're focused on that need your attention, but of course, everybody knows that you are out there and you're continuing to advocate and be a part of that change. And so it's been really great. Hearing more about it. I love that we were able to do the live interview, learn a little bit about your background and how you got in the industry, but also getting a better understanding of where we are in the industry and how we can move forward. I think there's a lot of power in the people, in the choices that we're making in the industry, as well as just voicing concern in wanting the state to be better in ways that we all benefit from. And so I think it's a really positive thing. I know that there's a lot of hardships that come with it, but it does seem like it's moving in the right direction. Just hopefully that the momentum can pick up.
I think it will, and like I said, it's for me to have to be patient. It's just pretty tough for me to swallow. But I just got to grit my teeth and bite my tongue, and just wait for things to happen. I'll put it out there in the universe, and they typically happen. So, but like I said, I'm going to continue to do what I do, and like I said, meeting the guys, and this is maybe off topic, but I've met so many people because of TikTok that came up and say hey, and we visit, and there's one guy in particular saw me in Sam's in Odessa, and he said, hey, and I got a message, and I said, hey, I saw you at Sam's. I said, well, why don't you come say hi? I said, you were loading Topo Chicos. I said, why you come help me, man? Them boxes are heavy. And he said, oh, I didn't want to bother you or anything. I said, I'm always happy to say hello and take time to meet guys and get their name, find out what they do, where they're working, what they're doing. And don't have to be shy. Don't have to be sitting at
Right.
the next table over staring at me and going, is that him? Is that him? Oh, he's not wearing his coveralls. So
Yeah.
that's been the content part, not only getting the message out, but I was overseas for over 2 decades, so you lose a lot of contacts, and you lose a lot of relationships, being
Right.
away from the United States. So it's been nice one of the nice things of social media is being able to have people reach out, and you establish new relationships and meet new people, and meet some of these younger folks that are coming through, and get to follow them along as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's great. And, again, like, just kind of being that voice, that mentor, and, getting to know them and them being able to watch what you've done and learn from you, I think it's definitely rewarding to watch. And I look forward to continuing to follow your journey, and really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
You
Thank you for
bet.
letting me come to town.
Yeah, you bet. And thank you, everyone, for watching Power of the Permian. We'll see you next time.